this House today with the numbers from the government's own budget papers, examples in my own electorate, is that this budget is not actually in their corner. Let me start with how vermin control is supposed to work in this state. Landholders pay what is called a declared pest rate. The government is supposed to match that dollar for dollar. The combined money goes to recognise biosecurity groups and to organise on-ground work, coordinated baiting programs, fox control and rabbit management. It is a practical system and the government's own contribution is what makes it function. This budget adds not a dollar to it, no increase, nothing new for the Great Southern. The Wild Dog Action Plan, which covers wild dog control across WA's grazing regions, is budgeted at a flat $1 million for every year from here out to 2030. But the more immediate problem is a separate pool around $800,000 a year, which keeps roughly 11 licensed management technicians and doggers employed by biosecurity groups doing on-ground work on government land. In some areas, these guys are removing between 380 to 400 dogs a year. That funding is due to be confirmed for this financial year. According to Farm Weekly, the application has been sitting on the Minister's desk since early 26 with no answer. I went through this budget. That $800,000 is not there. 11 people doing essential work not knowing if they have a job next week. There's a related problem also deserves attention. Both DPIRD and BCA run feral cat management programs, and for good reason. Feral cats cause serious losses for lamb producers and they're devastating the wildlife in the park at like Fitzgerald River and the Stirling Range, right adjacent to the boundaries of the Albany electorate. But I looked at the forward estimates for both programs. They go to zero in 28-29. A WA feral cat strategy expires in 28. There is no budget successor. When the strategy ends, the program ends with it, and there's nothing in the papers to suggest that the government has any plans for what's coming next. Now I want to talk about something that isn't a budget line, but it's a decision that government made that is making pest control harder for every farmer in the Great Southern. The Firearms Act 2024. Sheep farmers around the South Stirlings always relied on recreational shooters to help manage foxes on their country. These are family operations. There's one or two people running large tracts of land and every hour accounted for. Before the changes to the Firearm Act, rec shooters came out, did the work, cost the farmer nothing, and it was effective. Under the new firearm laws, giving a shooter access to your property now means maintaining a formal register of property letters, notifying the police if you withdraw, access or sell the land, and keeping record with DPIRD of what pest animals are actually on your property. The new health assessments and caps on firearm ownership are reducing a pool of licensed shooters available in the first place. WA farmers told the government-owned consultation process they needed rec shooters because farmers don't have time to manage all of their vermin control themselves. The government heard that and passed laws without addressing it. For the sheep country around South Stirling, the result has been one of the practical tools for fox control has been made significantly harder to access. Not because of a biosecurity decision, but because of a firearms decision that no one thought through and what it meant for the people running livestock in the Great Southern. What I find remarkable is the silence from my environmental groups and the Greens on this. Yeah. These are the same voices that rightly reminded us of the havoc that foxes and feral cats inflict on native wildlife. The birds, the bilbies, the small mammals that have been pushed to the brink across the Great Southern. They are not wrong with that. Foxes and feral cats are ecological disasters. But here is what the piece of legislation that directly undermine one of the most cost-effective ways that landlords in the Great Southern and the wider area of Western Australia control the very animals on private land, and not a word of objection. No amendment sought. Apparently the Greens are very concerned about foxes decimating native wildlife, right up to the point where doing something about it involves someone with a firearm and a property letter. So let me tell the House about a mouse plague that has hit grain country around Woodjanella. It's country that's east of Mount Barker this season. Farmers on the edge of the Stirlings were dealing with burrow densities their agronomists described as the worst in the state. Crops going into the ground during seeding were being eaten before they could be established. These farmers organised an aerial bait drop themselves, paid for it themselves, and were told they needed a second application to actually knock the numbers down. They couldn't afford it. The high-strength zinc phosphide bait ZP50 that gives the best results for the true plague densities that emergency permitted allowed to lapse at the end of 2023. Nobody renewed it. A new permit was eventually approved in May this year after the critical seeding window had already passed. In New South Wales, the government runs coordinated baiting programs and provides free bait to landholders. Here in WA, the only budget line for managing established pest, animals and weeds drops from 657,000 this year to 51 next year and then disappears entirely. Woodjanella grain growers funded their own plague response. The government had no program to offer them. How many financial hits did WA farmers have to take? And while I'm talking about practical barriers this government has created for landlords trying to do the right thing, let me tell you about tell the House about Peter King, who farms at Croncup on Lower Denmark Road in my electorate. Peter held a 1080 accreditation for fox control. Got it in 2018, complied with the law. When he tried to renew it, he completed the required online training through DPIRD's Proggy platform and then discovered there was apparently no final sign-off step and nobody could point him to. He asked DPIRD repeatedly who is authorised to complete the process. He cannot get a consistent answer. No one in the Great Southern seems to be able to do it. I wrote to the Minister in May 7 specific questions about how the sign-off process worked and whether the department knew that regional landholders were stuck. The Minister's reply on the 12th of June told me that DPIRD had sent Mr King some information and that he should ring the Pest and Disease Information Service. 7 questions I asked, not one answered.
Really?
Mr King's been engaging with the department. He just can't find anyone with the authority to finalise the process. He did everything that was asked of him. He cannot get a fox bait. The foxes, I should note, are not filing paperwork while they wait. I want to spend a moment on the industry in my electorate that tells a bigger story about the government's failure to back primary producers actually looks like. A constituent, Jack, it's not his real name, is one of the youngest apiarists in WA and has one of the largest number of hives in the Great Southern. He runs 300 hives around Albany and adjoining regions. His bees pollinate avocados in Pemberton, apples in Donnybrook. Without him and beekeepers like him, significant parts of the southwest horticulture industry simply don't function. And right now, Jack's barely breaking even. He has no employers, this fellow, because he simply can't afford to pay anyone. Western Australia produces something genuinely extraordinary. We are the last place on earth producing chemical-free honey at a commercial scale. Every other honey-producing region on the planet has variamite, yet we don't. Yet Jack will tell you it only takes 2 contaminated bees crossing the border to change that. We want stronger biosecurity checks. Jack believes the surveillance and contingency planning for variety incursion is not adequate, and given what happened in New South Wales after the mite was detected there in 2022, concern deserves to be taken seriously. But varroa isn't the only threat Jack's dealing with. He gets $4.80 a kilo for his honey. That's a price set by the major honey packers. Honey packers import thousands of tonnes of so-called honey from China every year, a product that competes directly with what Zac produces. Australia also imports honey from Argentina and India. Jack is a price taker, not a price setter. In the market, he's being undercut by inferior imported products while he's trying to maintain a world-class biosecurity advantage at his own expense. There is one beekeeper inspector for DPIRD to cover all of WA, and biosecurity checks. It's done by volunteers. Put it in concept with this mite. Queensland has lost 80% of their hives since the mite incursion, and that's not where we want WA to be. Jack's position is clear. Restrict imported honey, give Australian beekeepers a chance to operate on a fair market and protect the extraordinary biosecurity advantage that WA still has. I wrote to the Minister all about this on the 2nd of June. It's now the 16th. Still haven't received a formal reply. 14 days of silence on variamite biosecurity, on imported honey, on a beekeeper who was the backbone of pollination services across the region, and he was barely keeping the lights on. Before I turn to a bigger economic question, let me make one point well about the roadside weeds. Drive into Albany on any main road, walk along the creek lines through town, you'll find blackberry, arum lily and watsonia, all declared pests under Biosecurity and Agriculture Management Act. Growing unchecked on the road verges, the creek lines where the state has a legal obligation to control them. The Agriculture Protection Board used to manage this. That function is gone. The only Commonwealth Match Weed Management Program is in the budget, has a few $100,000 left and zero in every forward year. Those uncontrolled creek lines are a seed source spreading declared pests onto agricultural land that surrounds Albany. The budget says nothing about fixing it. Mr Speaker, if I could just bring all this together. Mr Acting Speaker. The Great Southern produces food fibre that sustains this state and feeds people well beyond it. The people who do that work are asking for very little. The pest control system that functions, a government that responds when it is written to, and a fair go for industries that are producing something genuinely world-class. What we are getting instead is a flatline biosecurity budget with dogger funding sitting unanswered on the Minister's desk. Firearm laws that make it harder to manage foxes without asking what it means for sheep farmers in the Stirlings. A mouse plague response that left Woodgenella growers to fund their own bait drops. And a constituent in Croncup who's completed his training still can't get a fox bait. A beekeeper who is the backbone of pollination services across the region asking reasonable questions about biosecurity and imported honey and waiting weeks for supply. Roadside weeds are declared obligation and an ignored one. This budget fails the Great Southern, and I support the motion.